Welcome back, everybody, to the Thrive After Sports podcast. If you're listening on the Power of Story, thank you for tapping in there. I'm here with a very great man today. This is a man I've had the pleasure of connecting with recently. Ever since we connected, nothing but good vibes, good conversation. Both of us are serving the athlete community, and I'm excited for you guys to hear from him today. I'm here with Mr. Cory Camp. What's going on, Cory?
Taj, thanks for having me, man. It's funny. We met only a few weeks ago, and my life is already better for it. So I'm excited to see where this goes today.
Hey, the feeling is mutual, brother. I'm a better man for having connected with you. And like you said, it's only been a few weeks. So I'm excited to dive into this conversation, man. I know you're going to drop a ton of gems, going to bring a ton of value to the audience. And even just by people listening to your story and hearing how you got to doing the work that you're doing now, and then really taking a deep dive into what that is. I'm excited for people to hear, man. So I'm going to get out the way just for anybody who's listening. I'm going to give you a quick intro into who Cory is, and then we'll dive into his story. So Cory is a personal performance coach who helps former athletes win the game of life, both physically and mentally. And he's also the host of the Athletic Mindset podcast. Definitely go check that podcast out. We'll tell you where to find it. But just use Google for now, folks, if you want to stop and go look it up. So I wanted to start with this, Cory. Obviously, you were an elite athlete, man. You were a swimmer at the University of Delaware. Can you just talk about what the process was like as your career was starting to wind down and what the transition into life outside of the pool was like for you?
Yeah, definitely. Love that question. I think that transition wasn't as easy as I thought it would be, because the kryptonite, although it can be our superpower when we are athletes, is our ability to hyper focus on like that goal. And for so long, swimming was that goal for me. So I was hyper focused on it, so much so that literally my pulled my head out of the water for the last time, and I was like, where do I go now? I don't understand. All of a sudden, I had this original plan was to go to physical therapy school. That didn't work out. Is to go to occupational therapy school. That didn't work out. I was like, okay, what am I good at? And I started like throwing my throwing stats around. I was like, yeah, but like I went this time in this race, and I quickly found out that no one in the real world, so to speak, cared about any of that. And that really bruised my ego. I was like, what the heck? Here I was in my own head, I was this huge deal, but in the real world, I was a nobody. So I had to get okay with being a beginner again. And I started off in sales, was my first stab at trying to be successful in life after sport, because I at the time thought financial success was what I was really after. I wanted to be the first of my teammates to be the six-figure earner for whatever reason. I have no idea what six figures actually gives you, because I reached it at one point and it didn't change my life forever. I was still kind of unhappy when I looked in the mirror. And that really started me down this journey of like, okay, personal growth. What the heck does that mean? Who am I as a person? Who am I without swimming? Who am I without sports? And then I really started to get like, how can I actually bring that old experience to really serve me in this moment and where I'm at now? And it's a fun journey.
Yeah, man. Indeed. It does become fun once you get past some of the initial shock of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really figuring out that framework to operate within. Like I said that earlier, that ability to hyper focus, it serves you really well as an athlete because you have that framework. You have, if you're a football player, like you have your preseason, your competition, and maybe the postseason, hopefully winning a championship. For me, all sports are kind of laid out that way. So we understand how to hyper focus, when to do it, when to work hard, when to show up. Then all of a sudden that framework is removed, and it can be very, very frustrating because we have free time for the first time in how many years of our lives? We don't know how to fill it. So to me, that journey is really all about how can I find a framework that works for me to then apply all of these soft skills that I was told for so long I was great at, hyper focusing, my work ethic, waking up super early and applying myself at everything I'm doing. That doesn't mean anything if I am not happy within or operating within a framework. You know what I mean?
100%, man. That makes a lot of sense. And before we get into all the amazing work you're doing now and how you even went about the process of carving that lane out, I want to go back to something you said because I'm intrigued by this. How you said at first you were thinking it was physical therapy, occupational therapy, right? What was your thought process behind that? Was it because you're an athlete, you wanted to kind of have an athletic career? And then what was it that had you like, no, I don't think that's for me?
It was really being drawn to, I mean, we want to be around people that are like us, that are like-minded. Our life's better when we are surrounding ourselves with people that, challenge us, but also have a similar background and understanding. And at the time, I thought the only way that I would be able to do that would be through an avenue like physical therapy, because unfortunately, most athletes go to physical therapy at some point in their career, depending on their sport. They have some sort of injury where they need to rehab and come back. So I was like, naturally, if I want to be around athletes, I'm going to be the team doc. I want to be the team physical therapist, like something like that. I just want to be around those guys, and I want this to be a forever thing. I don't want it to be okay, I'm done with my swimming career and I have to put that book away, and I'm never learning from it again. How can I make this a forever thing? And that was the first stab at doing just that, and it didn't work out, and that's okay.
Right. 100%, man. I had the same experience where I initially wanted to be a physical therapist because of everything you just laid out. I wanted to
Yeah.
stay around the sport. It sounds like a cool title, when you're at family dinners. What are you doing now? Oh, I'm a physical therapist. You know what I mean? Kind of has that air to it. And then I realized, how much work was involved. And I was like, I don't know about all that. I don't know if I could be in all these anatomy classes and stuff like that. This might be a little bit too much for me. And then you talked about, man, how you went into sales. And this is actually why I was asking you about the physical therapy side of it, because
Yeah.
I don't know if you've probably seen this in your experience too, man. A lot of athletes, we go into sales or coaching when we're done playing, because of A, like you talked about, the coaching side of it, we want to stay around the sport, or B, the sales side of it is people tell us, hey, you're an athlete, you're a competitor, you will be great at this, which is true. But you also alluded to the fact that it's only true if you're in the right vehicle or if you're being competitive at something that's meaningful to you. So you were successful in sales, right? When did you reach the point when you were doing sales where you were like, this ain't it, I got to figure out something else?
um, when I reached that imaginary finish line that I thought was sales, was this mythical like six-figure landmine. Um, and I got there and I was like, wait a second, I need to. I paused. I looked in the mirror and I was like, I don't like how I physically look at that moment. I had put on some weight. I didn't like how I was moving in just a day to day life. And I found myself just super wrapped up in going through the motions. And I wasn't applying myself or being fully present in each moment that I was experiencing during the day. It just felt like I was on autopilot. And I was like, I don't want to live like this anymore. And it's funny because you mentioned the two options of coaching and sales. Those are the two, like, I guess, jobs or avenues for any athlete, right? And it's funny because one of the ways my sales role evolved, I started off doing refinancing of mortgages, but I was really good at talking to other people about what I was doing and getting them to buy into the vision of the company and coming in for interviews, checking it out. So much so that they were like, hey, you should actually be in the recruiting side of the company. So they moved me over there. And I was like, wait a second. I don't really love what I'm doing on the sales side. And now you're having me fully on recruit people to do the same thing. But that being
Mm.
said, I mean, as a recruiter for 3 months out of my life, that's how long that lasted. I loved talking with former athletes and being like, hey, this could be a solid vehicle for you post sport. I wish I knew a little bit more about what I knew now, because it wouldn't be like every athlete, all right, this is the job for you. It would be more of a, okay, let's understand where you're at and be more honest of like, is this a good fit? Is this not a good fit? Kind of deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I see. I didn't know that. I didn't know that part about your journey, man. I didn't know you actually went from sales to recruiting. That's cool. Because I had a similar path where I went from sales and I realized, well, I wasn't put into a recruiting position, but I went into recruiting because I wanted to help people. But that gave me the clarity that I needed to be like, okay, I enjoy helping people, but what do I want to help them with? And of course, that eventually leads to helping former athletes. But I love how you talked about being on autopilot at one point, man, because
Mhm.
I think a lot of people listening to this or watching this, not just former athletes, they kind of go through life being on autopilot, you know? So obviously you were able to at a certain point snap out of that and start to be more intentional. What was that process like of you had the realization? What happened next? How did you start to be like, okay, no more autopilot. I'm gonna be intentional, Cory, when I go through life, you know?
Yeah, it's funny because when we have those moments of, oh, shoot, like this is what I've been doing on autopilot for the past however amount of time, it can be really scary. It can be really daunting because we don't like what we see and we want to make a change, but now all of a sudden we're faced with, how do I change? How do I change what I don't like what I'm seeing here? And I think how I addressed that issue was, well, why don't I talk with some other people? Find some people that are doing things that I want to be doing and just have a conversation with them, find out from them. And it's really funny because literally it's coming up on about a year, March of last year when everything shut down. That was really the like, oh, shoot, I've been on autopilot. I was leaving my house at 4:30 in the morning, not getting it back until about 8:30 at night, doing all these things at a country club. I loved the work that I was doing there, but I didn't realize how on autopilot it was until everything paused. And then when it paused, I made a conscious choice to start being proactive with how I'm going to take my life from that moment on, where I think that makes all the difference. A lot of people, when they're forced to pause, like COVID has forced many of us, we then sit there and we're like, okay, I'm just going to wait until the next thing comes. And that's whether I'm going to wait until my job hires me back, I'm going to wait until the interview comes along. But if you can be proactive, and I challenge everyone listening to be more proactive in their life, that's when the things are really going to start to happen for you rather than happening to you on a daily basis.
I love that, man. Yeah, there's definitely a time for sitting, being still, waiting for things to come to you. But
Yeah.
to your point, man, I love that you touched on that. There's also a time for being proactive, 100%. And you have this phrase that I love, man. That it's actually had me rethink or be careful about how I put things out, and that's forever athlete. You
Mm.
know, before I kind of give you before I tell you the impact that that's had on me, I love to hear like how that came about and how you started putting that out there, man. Because I really like that.
Yeah, I mean, it really came through my own journey. I mean, throughout that period of figuring out graduation to this point in time now, about 4 years later, it was dealing with this internal identity crisis of who am I without sport? Who am I without the swimming pool, without that vehicle? And it really caused me to strip down my sport. And this is actually what I encourage a lot of athletes to do is strip down to its most basic layer. Why did you get involved in whatever sport it was you did in the first place? When I did that, I found I loved swimming because it brought me to closer together with people and it gave me an excuse to relate with people from all different backgrounds. And it wasn't until I really started to realize just how impactful that is that then I started to become intentional. Like, how can I live every day bringing that into my life again? And with that, it's part of it was like, okay, being a former athlete kind of subconsciously sends this message to us of I have to completely leave everything that I accomplished behind. No one cares about the stats anymore. I can't move my body like I used to be able to. I can't lift the weights that I used to be able to. And it shifts it to a forever athlete. It's like, okay, so what if you can't do that? You can move your body in ways that 99% of the people on this world can't. So appreciate that and live into that and find some new ways to explore it and make it fun again. Because ultimately, all of us got into sports and we fell in love with what we did, probably because it was the most fun, exciting thing at that point in time. So if you can look into your identity as a new opportunity each day to live into that fun and excitement, you're going to start to feel more like you again. You're going to let that inner child aspect of yourself kind of come out and play again, and doing so is just so freeing, and you start to see the possibility rather than these limitations that society loves to throw on you as a former athlete, quote unquote.
Right. Yeah, I really love that, man. And I think you posted something recently about that. I know you've been talking about it for a while now,
Yeah.
but your recent post really struck me because, well, several reasons. But just from personal experience, like I've always, since I started working with athletes, and even before then, I always had the mindset of, yeah, I'm still an athlete. Like you said, I move like an athlete. I'm a competitor, even if that means competing with myself. And
Mm.
so, to your point, when I saw that, I was like, I'm going to have to rethink my use of the term former athlete. Because although I encourage people, and you and I have had many conversations about this, or just um, if you're encouraging someone to apply their athletic mindset to everyday life, continue to take care of yourself, your health, and also the mental side of things, it is kind of a contradiction to refer to them as a former athlete.
Mm-hmm.
So the term forever athlete is something that I think is very powerful that you've come up with that and that you're really pushing that message. And I think it needs to be more in the conversation. So
Yeah, it's one, I appreciate that too. It's really diving into this notion that, I mean, at its core, who we are as individuals, beyond just athletes, is we're fluid, we're ever evolving. It's the growth mindset in a nutshell, right? So if that's the case, why can't you as an athlete be something that was forever growing? Like there was always another level to hit on the football field for you, and there's always another swim meet, another time standard, someone to beat. Like it was forever growing. Life is no different. There's now all these parallels where I'm like, okay, I see this. It just makes sense to me, and I'm going to attack it with the same mentality that I had when I was swimming. And when I do that, I feel the most me, authentically and genuinely me, as I ever have. And that's, I mean, that's the secret to peak performance. That's the secret to getting into the zone or whatever you want to call it. But that's a huge, I think, mindset shift that people could benefit from.
100%, brother. I want to get back into the story, the tale of Cory Camp, because I know a lot of former athletes listen to this, and I don't want to overlook any part of your journey because as people are listening, I want them to see themselves in your journey. So I think where we left off, you were in that sales role, didn't like what you saw in the mirror. They put you into a recruiting role. You kind of felt the like contradiction, or you felt like a hypocrite, kind of like, I'm putting people into a role I'm not enjoying. And
Yeah.
then you mentioned something about a country club. Was that the next role, or what happened after the recruiting position?
Yeah, that was the next step. In recruiting, I was like, I don't love this. So the country club that I was actually an assistant coach at for a couple years during my college years, swimming days, I had a head coach position open up. And the irony is right around where I'm starting to not like sales, not loving the recruiting. I haven't shifted over to recruiting yet, but I'm about to. I get a random email from a family at the club and that said, "Hey, we're looking for swim lessons and we would love if you're still teaching, if you're in the area, if you could like come down on the weekends maybe and teach our kids." And I was like, I'm living up in Baltimore, Maryland at the time, and this club is just outside DC. So it's about a 45-minute to an hour drive. And they were like, "We'll make it worth your time." It's like, heck, why not? I was very, very passionate about teaching kids how to swim. I'm really passionate about teaching anyone how to swim. I think it's a life skill that we should all have. So I was like, man, you're tugging on my heartstrings. It doesn't matter how far I'm going to drive. Yeah, yes, I'll sign up. I'll do it. So I started doing this on the weekends, and I reconnect with the operations director at the club while I'm doing this because I have to get onboarded on staff again to get, all the logistical back end stuff signed up, paperwork, okay, to do these lessons. And as I'm doing that, a few weeks go by and he's like, "Man, like we really aren't happy with our head coach performance. Like we let him go." And he was like, "Dang, it stinks that you have this like full-time job that you can't be the head coach." And I was like, "Well, you'd even consider me to be the head coach?" And he's like, "Yeah, we would like love to have you, but obviously you're tied up with these other commitments." And I was like, "Well, I don't know if you're reading my mind right now, but I actually hate my life in this other role. So can we explore that option?" So I went through the interview process, applied, and landed the job. And here's the real kicker: I landed the job about a week into doing the recruiting role. So not only did I have some resistance around bringing people in to replace the role of sales that I didn't like in the first place. But now I knew I had a timeline of like when I'm actually leaving. And the funny part was the head coaching swim job didn't start until Memorial Day weekend. And this is like February. So I'm like,
Wow.
I can't leave my recruiting role for what, 3 months? Because I don't have any source of income lined up in the meantime. And that was just kind of a weird limbo period where I was, again, just kind of showing up, going through the motions. Fortunately, I didn't really care about the job that I did have because I kept looking forward to the next thing there. And I took that leap of faith, took this head coaching job. The irony of that is it's a 2 month gig. It's Memorial Day weekend until the first week in June or the first week in August, and that's it. There's nothing beyond that. But that was the perfect thing for me in that moment. And that actually sparked my first stint into entrepreneurship. As I'm coaching that summer team that summer, they have an indoor facility. It's 4-lane pool, and I never saw anyone in it. And me just being forward thinking looked at that and I said, what if we were able to create something there? What if it's a year round swim program? So I pitched that to the same guy who hired me. He's like, we love that idea, but we don't want to give you a salary for it. Like there's too much risk involved. We don't know if it's going to be successful or not. How about you run it yourself and you can take 100% of the revenue? We won't even charge you for the space. Just go out and do it. And I said, let's roll. And that was all I needed to hear, you know?
That's right.
Um,
Oh man.
it was beautiful. So that grew over a year to 2 years. At the same time as I'm building that up, I get into the fitness game as I'm starting to understand my own body, what is working for me, what's not working for me. Get a few personal training certs, my CSCS, my CPT, dive in next to the nutritional space, get a nutrition cert. And then I started getting this real fascination with mindset. And that was really where things took off. I become the assistant fitness director at the club in addition to the year-round swim program and the head coaching job in the summer. So I'm doing all the things, and now you can understand why I was working from 4:30 a.m. until 8 p.m. Most days because it was a lot, but I loved it, and that really led me into this podcasting space and life optimization stuff as I started to figure out, okay, how can I make myself as efficient and optimize my own day and now help other people to do the same.
Once again, man, it all comes back to you were doing something to try to help yourself, and
Yeah.
that ended up being something you wanted to pass on to other people. And that's a beautiful thing, man. I love hearing stories like that because a lot of people are trying to figure out what am I going to do with my life? I have no idea. And a lot of times it's right under your nose. You know, what have you been through? What is something that has been valuable for you that you've been able to learn from someone else or teach yourself? And how can you pass that on to other people? And that's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing, man.
We love to make it more complex in our head, right? Than
Right.
it has to be.
Right, absolutely. Quick side note, man. I was speaking of you becoming a like really getting into fitness. Were you that buff when you were swimming? 'Cause I'm like, man,
No,
you look like a football player, bro. You look like a strong safety or something. I'm
no,
like,
I wish, man. That was part of it. Like when I was a distance swimmer in college. So for those of you who are not familiar, that means I was stick thin. I'm 5'10 at the time. I was like 155 soaking wet if I was like
wow.
lucky. But that was like the body type that I needed to have to be successful. The irony is like I could eat 6,000, 7,000 calories a day and be completely fine. I couldn't put on weight to save my life. So when swimming ended, I went complete 180. I hit the weight room hard. I was like, I'm gonna bulk up and get shredded. And then quickly like learned that my same eating habits from swimming didn't apply anymore. I couldn't eat that amount of calories a day. And that kind of kickstarted my journey of like, okay, here I am being fit, but I really just overbulked and now I was fat. How can I get back
Mm,
into alignment? And then that led me to becoming a personal trainer from there.
right. Yeah, man. Okay, let's get it back on track. I was just curious. I was itching to ask you that question. I'm like, I wonder if there's no way he was in the pool that buff, man. Doesn't make sense.
I would have sunk.
For sure. Okay, man. So let's talk about like once you had the vision, because it's one thing to have a vision of I want to help other people do this, right?
Yeah.
It's another thing entirely to actually take the leap, put yourself out there, and be consistent, as consistent as you've
Mm.
been, especially, man. So, what was that process like of like, hey, I like this, I want to help people with this, and I'm gonna get it going? What was that like initial steps look like, and how did that lead up to everything you're doing right now?
That's a great question. Um, what I encourage everyone listening to do, and what I did that really changed the trajectory of my life, was writing out for 30 minutes to an hour my whole story up until that point in time. And then from there, going back and reading it and pulling out these themes. And each time I saw some adversity in my life, whether it was trying to get recruited in the first day of recruiting, no phone calls. I had an unknown heart condition that started showing up at the same time that I'm starting to get scholarship offers. And like, do I tell these college coaches that I have this health condition or I don't? Like, where juggling that. And each theme that I saw of these major life points up until that moment, I saw one thing that it kept coming down to. Each time that I doubled down on me and myself and betted on myself, it paid off. It ended up paying dividends on the back end. Sometimes it wasn't an immediate thing. It was 9 months down the road, 2 years down the road, it paid off. Other times it was like it was the right choice and it happened right in that instant. That gave me the level of confidence to then say, you know what, I can leave the safe sales role with the benefits and all that and go into the country club coaching for the summer and I'll be okay. And then as more recently as August of 2020, the confidence to say, I'm going to walk away from a really, really good thing and create space for more. The challenge I think every one of us faces when we are stuck with that decision of, do I go all in on this or not? And we have to give up something to do that, is our mind can only see what we're going to be losing. It can't actually really comprehend what we gain in that. And we offset that through looking at our past and seeing how have we done that in the past, and that sometimes just gives you that little bit of reassurance, that little bit of confidence that you need to say, you know what, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I trust that it is, and I'm going to take the first step. I'm going to put in my for me it was I'm going to put in my 2 weeks, and I'm going to just make this happen because I trust myself that I can. And I'm fortunate enough to be talking to you in February, a few months later, and we're still going.
Yeah, man, that's phenomenal, bro. That is really, really solid advice right there. Not only just solid advice, but it's very encouraging to someone who may be on the fence or in the middle of it, feeling like, you know, I lost so much, I've sacrificed so much, I'm not getting anywhere. To your point, man, to anyone listening, you have no idea. Like, really, I suggest you just rewind that back and listen to what Cory just said over again, because you have no idea what can unfold for you. Both Cory and I are testaments to what can happen when you just take a leap and go with your gut and be committed to serving and continually being consistent with who it is that you want to help. So I really appreciate you sharing that, Cory. That was really strong advice right there, man.
Yeah,
Um,
man. It's what I'm passionate about doing, so I appreciate you allowing me to.
Of course, brother. With that being said, we got to talk about, you took that leap, you stayed committed, you reminded yourself of all the good things that could happen despite what you were giving up, despite what you were
Mm.
sacrificing. And here you are today doing incredible work. We were just talking before we started recording. You just officially launched your program. Let's talk about all that, man. What is Cory Camp up to these days, and how are you serving, brother?
Yeah, I love it. So the main platform that I do as part of my business is called this More Than Movement coaching program. It's a group coaching concept. And the focus of it really is to help former athletes become that forever athlete and embody that truly. It's to help accelerate that growth journey that I think you and I both go went through. And instead of it lasting 4 years worth of work, we condense it into 10 weeks. And it takes everything from focusing on confidence in yourself, dealing with these questions of who am I without the sport, finding answers to that in that space. And then we have it all complemented with a 10-week workout program designed to help reinforce all of the things that you and I are even talking about on here. Like, what does it mean to fully trust yourself into the unknown, well, what's the most tangible way that an athlete could feel that? With their own physical body. So why don't we go and do a max testing today and figure out, like, we're not going to know if we can't deadlift 400 pounds until we try. So let's try it. And if we do it, awesome. We surprised ourselves and our confidence increased. We didn't do it, no worries. There's another day and we can get back to the drawing board and figure out that. It's getting people to be okay with this concept that both failure and success, they're not a permanent thing. They're just feedback of that moment in time. And how can we make sure we're using that feedback constructively rather than destructively in their life? So that's really kind of what I'm up to. I'm helping other forever athletes along their own journey figure out what the heck that actually means and really step into their own power and trust themselves again and feel their most authentic self in the process.
Really love that, man. And one of the things you and I had talked about when we first connected was really this mind body connection that you're really adamant about, and you're doing such a good job of actually having a strategy in place to make that happen. Because it's one thing to talk about it, but it's another thing to be like, these are very strategic things. Even like you said, just going in and let's do a max day. I think that's a very good way, like you said, to kind of make that mind body connection. And I love that your work is centered around that. And then you have a bunch of different directions you can kind of pivot off of from there. By the way, Forever Athlete is for sure going to be the name of this episode, man. I love how it naturally unfolds throughout the course. Like Forever Athlete with Cory Camp. That's the title of this for sure. But yeah, man, you're already doing great work. Congratulations on your first program, not your first program, but this specific program that launched this week. What's next, man? Like what can we expect from Cory Camp in the future, man? What do you got cooking? What's the long-term vision? All of that.
Yeah, I love that question. I just get lit up thinking about all the possibilities that are there, which can ultimately be a downfall sometimes too if we're not careful of learning what to say yes and what to say no. And I think coming back to those core values, if you can understand those, then it makes it easy to choose what you go after and what you don't. For me personally, I'm all about community. I'm all about bringing together people with a similar background because I think nothing is more powerful in this world than for you to authentically and vulnerably share your story and for someone listening on the other end to say, I get him. I understand it. Me too. Like I've been through that. And that's the power of connection. That's at the heart of everything I do, whether it's group coaching. I do one-on-one coaching as well, where it's more individualized on what tailor made to what your needs are. And then really what's next? I mean, we'll see what 2020 allows here with event space, but I would love to host retreat style stuff for forever athletes to come together and get to know one another really, really well in a safer space like that, whether that is in LA, in California, across the country. But that's really the kind of the next pioneering step for me that I want to tackle this year.
That's a beautiful thing, man. I'm excited for all that. Please make sure I get an invite to the Forever Athlete retreats, man.
Yeah,
I
you're
will
on
be
the
there.
list. Don't you worry.
That's what I'm talking about, man. That's what I'm talking about. Um, Please, man, tell everybody how they can learn more about what you're doing, how they can connect with you, all of that.
Yeah, well, Taj, first off, man, I appreciate your time and you asking me to come on here. It's always exciting to connect with you and share some value. So thank you. For those that want to keep up with me, I'm easy to find at Cory Camp, no E in my name, on Instagram, I believe on Twitter as well. I don't post on there all that often. The Athletic Mindset Podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. And then my website is just corycamp.com. And that's got a whole bunch of information from podcast, blog, coaching programs, and offerings. And that's where you'll find hopefully these event spaces coming to you soon as well.
That's right. Also, go follow this man on Clubhouse as well. If you're not on Clubhouse,
I forgot
get on
about that one.
Clubhouse. Man, I'm trying to get used to it, but it just crossed my mind because every time I'm in a room where you're sharing on Clubhouse, there's a lot of value being given. So definitely, if you're on Clubhouse, go follow Cory Camp on there as well. Jump into some of the rooms he's in. A lot of good discussions like these being had on Clubhouse. Make sure you jump in there as well. Before we wrap up, man, I love asking this question, and I know this is gonna be a great one, man. Like, I want you to go back to young Cory. You know, he's just getting out the pool for the last time. You're like, man, this is my last meet. Like, this is crazy. This is the last time I'm actually going to be competing in the water. You know, as you're drying off with the towel and all that, man, if you could pull young Cory aside, what's some words of wisdom or advice that you could give him for the road ahead?
That's huge. I love that. For context, my last swim was definitely, it was actually my worst swim of my college career at the conference level. It was the worst
Wow.
I had ever finished, um, which, everything aside, I still finished eighth. So it was pretty okay in the grand scheme of things. So the advice that I would give myself in that moment now would be, there's more to it than this. Like, this isn't permanent. I know you're not happy with how things wrapped up, but there's more to it than swimming. And that's taking it all the way back to that single track hyper focused mind. I put so much into the outcome, and did that help with my performances at times? Yes. But did it help with me handling the lesser performances? Absolutely not. So if I were to know that there was more to my life than me as a college swimmer, and embrace that and see like, okay, I can be confident in what's next, rather than like, what do I do now? And
Right.
freak out about it,
Yeah, that's strong advice, man. I love that. I know someone got a lot out of that right now. So I appreciate you sharing that, man. Appreciate you coming on and giving your time to be able to share your story and be vulnerable with your journey and give just strong advice. Gym after gym was dropped on this, man. So I'm really glad we connected. Looking forward to all that's to come in the future for everything you got going on and everything that we could be collaborating on and working on in the future. But definitely appreciate your time, man. It's been great to have you. I'm gonna be listening back to this one over and over again, man.
Taj, man, like I said earlier, thank you for having me. It's always, I learn from you too through these processes. So thank you for allowing me to grow here today.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Well, with that being said, folks, we'll wrap it up. Go get in touch with this man. We'll have all of his contact info, information, social media handles, all that stuff in the show notes. Go check out Cory Camp, follow the journey, tap in with some of that wisdom, some of the great value he's offering. This has been another great episode of Thrive After Sports and the Power of Story with Cory Camp. We'll see you next time.